When elite criminals evade justice, conventional criminology points to hidden tracks. We assume their financial maneuvers were too complex, or the concrete evidence was simply missing. The Jeffrey Epstein investigation provides a different model. This criminal network functioned in plain sight, deeply integrated into the highest echelons of global power. A 3-year investigation led by Senator Ron Wyden revealed the volume of data federal authorities possessed throughout the enterprise's operation. Investigators documented 4,725 distinct wire transfers. That represents $1.1 billion flowing through a single Epstein-linked account, with direct connections to sanctioned entities and known human trafficking operations. This granular financial intelligence was actively monitored, possessed, and flagged by the U.S. Treasury Department and apex law enforcement agencies. The documentation paradox explains this. A systemic breakdown where an overwhelming abundance of evidence triggers total institutional non-response. Gridlock occurs at the impunity threshold. This is the point where extreme wealth and network connectivity induce total bureaucratic paralysis. Modern regulatory bodies operate on incentive structures that penalize the pursuit of ultra-wealthy, politically insulated targets. This leads to rationalized self-censorship and institutional non-response. The sheer weight of extreme capital concentration causes the normal mechanisms of justice and accountability to structurally collapse. This institutional paralysis is the scalable consequence of a specific, quantifiable neurobiological profile colonizing the architecture of governance. Severe behavioral deviance is a structural reality. To understand the mechanism of capture, we must examine the physical circuitry of the brain. The etiology of paraphilic deviance, such as pedophilia, serves as a baseline example of how behavior is anchored in hardwired pathology. Unbiased whole-brain imaging identifies microstructural deficiencies in the superior fronto-occipital and right arcuate fasciculi. These tracts normally integrate sensory input with appropriate sociosexual appraisal. The degradation of these pathways alters the brain's sexual response, resulting in a literal cross-wiring of normative sociosexual appraisal. Clinical researchers define this structural reality as a disconnection syndrome. Because this disconnection is neurodevelopmental, standard penal deterrence and cognitive therapy cannot unlearn the attraction. Traditional punitive justice models are structurally mismatched to the biological reality of this physical disconnection syndrome. This structural breakdown also applies to systemic prejudice, which computes physically within the brains of individuals, particularly in law enforcement. Implicit bias is governed by the amygdala prefrontal cortex axis, a dual-system model of cognitive control. The amygdala functions as a rapid threat detector. Culturally conditioned brains process outgroup members as a baseline danger milliseconds before conscious thought begins. Egalitarian behavior requires the prefrontal cortex to successfully engage, sending a suppressive signal to override the amygdala's biased alarm. Officers routinely operate in fast-paced, highly chaotic environments that trigger severe acute stress, leading to rapid cognitive exhaustion. Under cognitive depletion, prefrontal regulatory mechanisms fail. Behavior defaults to the amygdala's rapid, biased threat appraisal. Implicit bias is a physical neural computation that reliably breaks down under high-stakes conditions, providing a biological mechanism for disproportionate police violence. The impulsive deviant and the stressed officer face immediate marginalization. However, modern corporate and political hierarchies paradoxically elevate a different, highly toxic neurobiological profile. This profile encompasses the dark triad. Machine learning models trace these traits to abnormal neural coordination. The unsuccessful or incarcerated psychopath exhibits severe structural impairments in the prefrontal cortex, leading to extreme impulsivity and poor long-term decision-making. The successful corporate psychopath possesses a highly developed prefrontal architecture. This allows them to regulate impulses and meticulously plan their exploitation of others. Remorse is regulated by the default mode network, or DMN. This is the neural substrate critical for self-reflection and affective empathy. Dysfunction in the DMN biologically precludes experiencing guilt, while an overactive central executive network grants the cognitive empathy required to manipulate others. High executive control combined with zero affective empathy creates the apex predator configuration, a profile perfectly evolved to climb power structures without moral hesitation. Once the successful psychopath consolidates control at the highest levels, the pathology spreads. A single pathological element spreads rapidly outward, altering the chemistry and operational logic of the entire surrounding environment. This is conscience dust. Individual pathology metastasizes into systemic organizational doctrine, replacing ethics with ruthless instrumentalism. The Epstein enterprise demonstrates this. Major banks engaged in deliberate compliance failures, systematically ignoring internal algorithms that flagged massive money laundering operations. Capture extended to apex law enforcement agencies. Actionable intelligence was systematically ignored to protect the broad connectivity of the network. The 2008 non-prosecution agreement, secretly negotiated by Alexander Acosta, subverted victims' rights to grant the Epstein network unprecedented blanket immunity. Apex predators at the top of a hierarchy colonize and reprogram the justice system, privatizing impunity. Traditional legal deterrents offer no protection against hardwired pathologies. This necessitates a move toward preventative biological oversight. Historically, brain screening was restricted to stationary hospital environments, making widespread vetting logistically impossible. Recent developments in field-capable AI-driven fMRI technology allow for rapid data acquisition in boardrooms and police academies. Advanced medical scanning technology now integrates seamlessly into everyday professional environments, completely bypassing traditional hospital and clinical limitations. Universal neurovetting allows organizations to proactively screen for DMN hypoconnectivity or implicit bias markers before granting an individual institutional power. The convergence of AI and portable neuroimaging makes mandatory biological screening logistically viable for current institutional use. Legal and academic circles often cite constitutional mental privacy to resist such measures. However, privacy protections must be balanced against the collective right to safety and the prevention of systemic institutional capture. When an individual seeks the power to imprison, judge, or govern, they voluntarily forfeit the right to keep their neural architecture hidden. Universal neurovetting serves as a biological firewall, protecting the integrity of public and corporate institutions from internal corruption. Society must implement this firewall, ensuring that those entrusted with power possess the neural architecture required